Now, I want to tell you something that most people do not want to hear. You have seen the movies. You have seen the sleek silver ships, the heroic captain at the controls, the dramatic countdown, and then whoosh, they are gone, sliding through the dark between stars as if they were just crossing a highway. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you probably thought, well, we will get there eventually. Better rockets, better fuel, some clever new engine, and we will just go. Simple as that. I am sorry to tell you that is not how this works, not even a little bit. The distance to Alpha Centauri, our single nearest neighboring star, is 4.2 light-years away. That sounds almost manageable when you say it out loud. 4.2 light-years. But let us translate that into something your body can actually feel. Light, the fastest thing that exists in this universe, traveling at just under 300,000 kilometers every single second, takes 4.2 years to make that crossing. If you drove a car at highway speed 100 kilometers per hour, without stopping, without sleeping, without ever once pulling over, it would take you approximately 45 million years to get there. The distance to our nearest star is not a number. It is a physical sentence handed down by the geometry of the cosmos itself, and that sentence says, you do not simply go. Now, here is the part where people usually say, fine, we will just build a faster ship. And that is precisely where the nightmare truly begins. Let me give you an image that I want you to hold on to very tightly, because it explains more than any equation could on its own. Imagine you are sitting inside a glass sports car, and you are driving through a violent sandstorm, not a gentle desert breeze, a genuinely massive, churning, roaring wall of microscopic sand and grit moving at extraordinary speed. Now imagine that car is going not 100 kilometers an hour, not 1,000, but something close to 100 million kilometers per hour, 1/3 the speed of light. What happens to that glass? The sand does not tickle it. The sand does not scratch it gently. At those speeds, each individual microscopic grain of sand carries the kinetic energy of a small explosive device. It punches through glass, through metal, through anything. It does not matter how thick you make the hull. It does not matter how brave the astronauts are. The math does not care about bravery. The sand does not negotiate. Now here is the part that genuinely unsettles people when they hear it for the first time. Outer space, the interstellar void between stars, is not empty. We like to think of it as empty because it looks empty. It is certainly close to empty by any measure a human being uses in daily life. But close to empty and perfectly empty are two entirely different things when you are moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. Between the stars, floating in the dark, there are dust grains. There are microscopic particles of rock and ice and carbon compounds. There are stray hydrogen atoms, 1 or 2 per cubic centimeter on average. That sounds laughably sparse. It is. By laboratory standards, it is closer to a perfect vacuum than anything we can create on Earth. But here is the thing. At relativistic speeds, those lonely little hydrogen atoms are not harmlessly drifting particles anymore. They are kinetic weapons. At 1/10 the speed of light, a single hydrogen atom strikes the nose of your spacecraft with roughly the energy of a fast-moving sand grain. And at 1/3 the speed of light, that energy increases by an order of magnitude that begins to sound genuinely violent. This is what physicists call interstellar friction, and it is the universe's most elegantly cruel joke on anyone who thinks interstellar travel is simply an engineering problem waiting for a cleverer solution. But let us back up, because before we even get to that terrifying sandstorm of empty space, there is an earlier problem, a more fundamental problem. A problem so brutal in its mathematics that it stopped serious physicists cold the moment they sat down and calculated it honestly. It is called the rocket equation, and it was written down by a Russian schoolteacher named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky at the turn of the 20th century. It is one of those equations that looks innocent on paper and then proceeds to destroy every romantic idea you have ever had about space travel. Here is the core of it. A rocket works by throwing mass backward so that it moves forward. Every gram of propellant you burn gets ejected out the back at high speed, and the reaction pushes you in the other direction. Simple enough. But here is the catch, and it is a devastating one. The fuel you carry has mass, and because it has mass, you need more fuel to move it. And that additional fuel also has mass, which means you need even more fuel to move that fuel, and so on. forever, exponentially. This is what people in the field call the tyranny of the rocket equation, and the word tyranny is not being used loosely. It is tyranny in the most mathematical sense of the word. The relationship between how fast you want to go and how much fuel you need is not linear. It is exponential. It compounds on itself like a debt that doubles every time you try to pay it off. Let me put some numbers to this so you can feel it physically. The fastest spacecraft humanity has ever launched is the Voyager probe. It is currently moving at roughly 17 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. That is genuinely fast by human standards. It is absolutely remarkable engineering. But at 17 kilometers per second, it would take Voyager approximately 75,000 years to reach Alpha Centauri, assuming it were pointed in that direction, which it is not. To get to Alpha Centauri in a human lifetime, say 40 years of travel, you need to be moving at roughly 10% of the speed of light. 10% of the speed of light is 30,000 kilometers per second. Voyager moves at 17 kilometers per second. The ratio between those two numbers should make you stop and sit quietly for a moment. Now, to accelerate a spacecraft to 10% the speed of light using conventional chemical rockets, you run directly into the exponential wall of the Tsiolkovsky equation. The numbers come out suggesting that for every kilogram of actual payload you want to deliver to Alpha Centauri, you would need a quantity of chemical propellant measured not in kilograms, not in tons, but in something approaching the mass of an entire planet. That is not a solvable engineering problem. That is the universe telling you in the clearest possible mathematical language that chemical rockets simply do not work for interstellar distances. They are not slow solutions that need upgrading. They are physically the wrong tool, the way a candle is the wrong tool for welding steel. People then say, fine, nuclear rockets, ion drives, antimatter engines. And yes, each of these buys you improvements, sometimes dramatic improvements. Nuclear pulse propulsion, which is the idea of detonating a sequence of nuclear bombs behind your spacecraft and riding the expanding shock wave forward, is genuinely one of the more physically serious proposals ever made for high-speed travel. The Orion concept from the 1950s and 60s, developed by serious physicists, suggested you could potentially reach perhaps 3 to 5% of the speed of light this way. 3 to 5% of the speed of light still means roughly 100 years to Alpha Centauri, with no way to slow down when you get there, because slowing down requires just as much fuel as speeding up, and you burned all your fuel getting fast in the first place. And we have not even gotten to the other wall yet, the deeper wall, the one that Einstein built into the geometry of the universe itself. When Einstein worked out special relativity in 1905, one of the things that fell out of his equations, almost as a side effect, was something profoundly strange about mass and velocity. As an object moves faster, its effective mass increases from the perspective of anything you might use to push it. This is not a mechanical effect. It is not friction or air resistance or anything like that. It is a fundamental geometric property of space-time itself. At everyday speeds, this effect is completely negligible. You do not notice it. Your car does not get meaningfully heavier when you drive it faster. But as you approach the speed of light, this relativistic mass increase becomes violent. At 90% of the speed of light, your effective mass from the perspective of whatever is pushing you is already more than twice your rest mass. At 99% of the speed of light, it is roughly 7 times your rest mass. At 99.9%, it is more than 22 times. At 99.99%, more than 70 times, and the curve never stops rising. It becomes vertical. It goes to infinity. What this means physically is that the closer you get to the speed of light, the harder it becomes to go faster, and not in a linear way, not in a doubling way, but in a way that reaches an absolute vertical wall at exactly the speed of light itself. To push any object with mass to precisely the speed of light requires infinite energy, not a very large amount of energy. Infinite energy, the kind of energy that does not exist in any finite universe. This is the speed limit of causality, and it is not a suggestion. It is not a barrier that a smarter civilization will eventually engineer around. It is built into the mathematical structure of space and time so deeply that violating it would require rewriting the laws that govern the existence of everything, including the atoms in your brain that are currently thinking about rewriting them. So the universe has given you 2 walls. First, the exponential fuel wall, which says you cannot carry enough propellant to get there at a meaningful speed using any physically reasonable onboard energy source. Second, the relativistic mass wall, which says that even if you had limitless fuel, you could never actually reach the speed of light, only approach it asymptotically, spending increasingly absurd amounts of energy to gain smaller and smaller fractions of additional speed. But let us say, for the sake of argument, that some future civilization solves both of these problems. Let us say they have a propulsion system we cannot currently imagine, one that efficiently converts mass to energy and pushes a ship to 30% of the speed of light without carrying absurd quantities of fuel. 30% the speed of light would get you to Alpha Centauri in about 14 years. That is genuinely fast. That starts to sound almost feasible. Now go back to the sandstorm. At 30% the speed of light, the interstellar medium is no longer a sparse, irrelevant collection of lonely atoms. It is a radiation environment, a lethal one. Each hydrogen atom floating in that near-empty void strikes the leading surface of your spacecraft with an energy equivalent to a cosmic ray particle. Cosmic rays, the ones that occasionally pass through your body right now as you read this, are a known health concern for astronauts, even in low Earth orbit, and certainly on trips to Mars. The flux of equivalent cosmic ray particles hitting the nose of a ship moving at 30% of the speed of light through the interstellar medium is not a health concern. It is a death sentence for any unshielded biological organism. The radiation would penetrate standard shielding materials. It would ionize the cells of anyone aboard. It would shred DNA with the casual efficiency of a machine designed specifically for that purpose. The crew would not be slowly sickened over years. They would be acutely irradiated on a timescale that makes the journey biologically unsurvivable, regardless of how good your medical equipment is. And the dust grains are worse. A dust grain of even a microgram, which is genuinely microscopic, invisible to the naked eye. At 30% the speed of light carries roughly the kinetic energy of a rifle bullet. The interstellar medium contains enough of these particles that the cumulative erosion of the spacecraft nose would be catastrophic over years of travel. You would need a shield of extraordinary mass at the front of the vehicle, which brings you right back to the exponential fuel problem, because now your shield itself needs to be accelerated. And then the shield itself erodes. And then you need a secondary shield behind the first one. Some serious proposals, like the Breakthrough Starshot Initiative, which aims to push tiny gram-scale laser sail probes to 20% of the speed of light using ground-based laser arrays, have grappled honestly with exactly this problem. Their solution is to make the spacecraft so small, essentially a postage stamp of electronics, that the total erosion damage over the journey is survivable for the probe, even if significant. A postage stamp of electronics. That is the serious scientific answer to interstellar dust at relativistic speeds. Not a colony ship, not a crew, a chip the size of your thumbnail. There is something deeply honest in that. There is something that I find beautiful in a chilling way. The universe is not malicious. It is not trying to keep us here. It does not have intentions. It simply has geometry, and the geometry of interstellar space combined with the geometry of spacetime itself creates a set of physical constraints so interlocking, so mutually reinforcing, that the barrier to biological interstellar travel is not one problem. It is a compounding structure of separate physical nightmares, each one serious enough to stop you on its own, all of them stacked together into something that begins to resemble an absolute prohibition. The fuel problem, the relativistic mass problem, the radiation problem, the erosion problem, the deceleration problem, the communication problem, the biological timescale problem. Each one of these is a genuine, independently serious physics challenge. Together, they form a wall that is not made of ignorance or insufficient technology. It is made of the actual mathematical architecture of the physical world. Now, some people hear all of this and they feel something like despair. I understand that feeling, but I want to suggest that it is the wrong response, and not because I am trying to be cheerful, but because the feeling of despair comes from a misunderstanding of what is actually valuable here. The popular mythology of interstellar travel treats the stars as a destination, as if the point is to get there, to plant a flag, to build a colony, to spread humanity across the galaxy the way we spread across continents. And within that mythology, the physics I have been describing is bad news. It is a locked door. It is a ceiling. But if you flip the frame and ask, what does it mean that these things are true, you find yourself standing in front of something genuinely magnificent. The fact that the speed of light is an absolute limit is one of the most beautiful constraints in all of physics. It is the constraint that makes causality possible. It is the thing that prevents information from traveling faster than time itself can process it. The universe is built in such a way that cause always precedes effect, everywhere, for everyone. And the speed of light is precisely the parameter that enforces this throughout all of spacetime. The tyranny of the rocket equation is not just a cruel joke. It is a window into the nature of momentum and energy and the conservation laws that hold the universe together with such ruthless consistency that you can predict the behavior of a rocket with the same mathematics you use to predict the behavior of a billiard ball, because they are the same physics, just scaled by many orders of magnitude. The radiation from interstellar dust at relativistic speeds is not arbitrary hostility. It is special relativity doing precisely what it does when you transform the reference frame of a particle. A hydrogen atom that is almost perfectly at rest in the interstellar frame becomes, in the frame of your speeding ship, a particle moving toward you at 30% the speed of light. Its kinetic energy in your frame is real. It is not an illusion. The same laws that give you the GPS signal in your phone, corrected for relativistic time dilation on the satellites, are the laws that turn those hydrogen atoms into radiation weapons. There is a consistency to it that I find more compelling, more genuinely awe-inspiring, than any story about a civilization that figured out how to break the rules. Because the rules are the thing. The rules are the universe. Understanding why the journey to Alpha Centauri is physically terrifying and almost certainly impossible for biological beings in any near-term or mid-term sense of the word is understanding something true about the nature of space and time and matter and energy. And understanding true things about the universe is the closest thing to contact with reality that a conscious being can achieve. We live on a small, warm, chemically extraordinary rock orbiting a perfectly ordinary star in a galaxy of 400 billion stars in a universe of 2 trillion galaxies. We are isolated by distances so vast that even light, the fastest courier in the physical world, takes years to cross even the smallest gap between stellar neighborhoods. We are, by any honest measure, alone in the practical sense of the word, not necessarily alone in the sense that no other life exists somewhere, but alone in the sense that the physics of the universe makes contact between civilizations separated by even 4 light years, a project of such staggering physical cost that it may simply never happen. And yet here we are, on this isolated rock, with brains that can derive the equations governing the motion of objects we will never touch, in star systems we will never reach, using a language of mathematics that turns out to be unreasonably, almost disturbingly accurate in its descriptions of a physical reality far beyond anything we can directly observe. We figured out that time runs slower when you move fast, and we confirmed it with atomic clocks on airplanes. We predicted that gravity bends light, and we saw it around the sun during an eclipse. We calculated the existence of gravitational waves and then detected them with a machine sensitive enough to measure a disturbance smaller than 1,000th the width of a proton. We are not going to Alpha Centauri, not in any biologically meaningful sense, not in any time frame that a human civilization can honestly plan around. The physics is not a temporary obstacle. It is the shape of reality. But we are the kind of creatures who can look at that shape honestly, measure it precisely, and find in its austere, unyielding geometry something that is worth more than any destination we could ever physically reach. We can find the truth of it, and that, in my view, is not a small thing.